Jack Callahan was adjusting the reins of the bay horse when the sound of hooves echoed through the dusty ranch yard. The biting Wyoming wind carried the scent of sage and dry earth, while heavy clouds gathered on the horizon. At 43, his calloused hands knew every broken fence, every injured animal, every overdue bill piled on the kitchen table. Silence had become his constant companion since Sarah left, leaving behind only memories and dusty photographs. Firm knocks on the front door interrupted his melancholic thoughts. With slow steps he headed to the entrance, expecting to find another creditor, or perhaps the vet. As he opened the door, he was met with an unexpected figure, a young woman in a worn hat and mud-caked boots, carrying a tattered backpack on her back. Her blue eyes shone with determination, but there was something deeper there, a vulnerability carefully hidden behind the confident posture she assumed before the stranger. "They said you needed a ranch hand," Emily Harper declared, trying to keep her voice steady as she observed the tall, bearded man in front of her. Her heart was pounding, but she couldn't show weakness at this crucial moment. Behind her, wrapped in a faded blue blanket, a few-month-old baby slept soundly, oblivious to the tension of the moment. Jack felt the air escape his lungs as his eyes fixed on the small bundle. His hands trembled slightly, and for an instant he was transported back to the days when he cradled his own son. The shock left him paralyzed on the doorstep, while Emily awaited a response that seemed not to come. The wind intensified, making dry leaves dance across the yard, and she adjusted the blanket to better protect the child from the approaching cold. "I can work hard," she added, noticing the man's hesitation. The Callahan Ranch was facing its darkest days since Jack had taken over the property after his father's death. The cattle had been reduced by the previous year's drought. The fences were giving way under the weight of time and neglect, and creditors were knocking on the door with increasing frequency. Emily proved to be more than she appeared. She handled a lasso with surgical precision, fixed equipment with surprising skill, and transformed simple ingredients into meals that filled the house with forgotten aromas. Golden pancakes for breakfast, steaming stew for dinner, and the sound of a lullaby echoing through the empty corridors. However, the baby's presence aroused curiosity and suspicion among the neighbors. Rumors began to circulate through town. Who was this mysterious woman? Why had Jack agreed to host a stranger with a child? The speculations threatened to further tarnish the ranch's already fragile reputation, creating unexpected obstacles for business. The torrential rains of March transformed the fields into true lakes, and the Platte River overflowed its banks with destructive fury. The remaining cattle were in real danger of being swept away by the current, representing the final downfall for the already struggling ranch. Jack and Emily rode side by side through the treacherous mud, their horses struggling against the slippery terrain as they tried to round up the dispersed animals. The rain lashed their faces, limiting visibility and increasing the danger of the operation. At the most critical moment, when a group of yearlings approached dangerously close to the swollen riverbank, Emily's horse lost its footing in the mud. She cried out in panic as she slipped towards the turbulent waters, holding the baby tightly against her chest. Without a second's hesitation, Jack dove from his saddle, his boots sinking into the mud as he ran to reach her. With desperate strength, he managed to grab her hand at the last instant, pulling her back to safe ground. The adrenaline was still coursing through both of them when Emily finally broke the silence she had kept since her arrival. With tears mixing with the rain on her face, she revealed the truth she carried as a burden. The baby was the son of her younger brother, Tommy, who had died in a work accident 6 months earlier. The child's mother had abandoned the baby still in the hospital, and Emily had assumed legal guardianship. But Marcus Dawson, a violent and possessive man who considered himself to have rights over the Harper family, was determined to take the child for himself, falsely claiming to be the biological father. Emily had fled in the dead of night, traveling through 3 states until she reached Wyoming, following only the advice of a stranger at a gas station who mentioned an isolated ranch where she might find work. Her words came out between sobs, laden with fear, hope, and the accumulated exhaustion of months of fleeing and uncertainty about the future. The revelation completely transformed the dynamic between Jack and Emily, creating a bond based on mutual understanding and shared purpose. Jack, who had lost his own son at 6 years old due to pneumonia, recognized in the situation an opportunity to protect an innocent child and offer the home she deserved. As the weeks passed, the ranch gradually regained its vitality. Fences were repaired with new wood, the cattle grew in number again, and the house filled with life, with the baby's laughter echoing through the rooms. Emily became the ideal partner, not only in work, but in the reconstruction of dreams that seemed lost forever. On a golden spring afternoon, as he watched Emily rocking the child on the porch, Jack realized that family can arrive in the most unexpected ways. However, a letter arrived that morning, bearing the official letterhead of a Colorado law firm, and Emily paled as she recognized the sender. Marcus Dawson had found her trail. The letter bore the official letterhead of the Dawson and Associates law firm, and Emily's hands trembled as she recognized the familiar handwriting in the signature. Marcus had hired private detectives who tracked her banking movements to a small Nebraska town, from where they followed leads to Wyoming. The correspondence demanded the immediate return of the child, claiming custody rights and threatening criminal charges for kidnapping. Jack watched Emily's pale face as she read each word, her lips trembling with fear and revolt. The baby played happily on the living room rug, completely oblivious to the approaching storm. "He won't give up," Emily murmured, folding the letter with trembling hands. "Marcus is a lawyer. He has connections, money. He always gets what he wants." Jack felt anger rise in his chest, remembering his own powerlessness years earlier, when doctors said nothing more could be done for his son. This time, he had the power to fight and protect the makeshift family he had learned to love. Sheriff Thompson arrived at the ranch the next morning, bringing news that confirmed Emily's worst fears. Marcus Dawson had filed a temporary court order claiming to be the child's biological father, based on forged documents and bought testimonies. The officer, a 60-year-old man with a grey mustache, had known Jack since childhood and could see the sincerity in his eyes. "I have to uphold the law, Jack, but something isn't right about this story," he said, taking off his hat as he watched Emily rock the baby. "Marcus Dawson has a questionable reputation in Colorado. There have been reports of domestic violence before, but the victims always withdrew their complaints." Emily felt a shiver run down her spine as she heard the confirmation of her worst fears. Jack clenched his fists, determined not to let that man destroy the peace they had worked so hard to achieve. "How much time do we have?" he asked, already formulating a plan in his agitated mind. The answer came faster than they expected: 72 hours to file a contest or voluntarily surrender the child. Jack drove the old pickup truck down the dusty roads to Cheyenne, where he located Sarah Martinez, a family law attorney who accepted the case after hearing the full story. A determined woman of Mexican descent, Sarah had built a career defending women and children in vulnerable situations. "We're going to need solid evidence," she explained, flipping through the documents Marcus had presented. "DNA test, medical records, witnesses to corroborate Emily's version." Meanwhile, Emily remained at the ranch with the baby, every shadow on the property making her heart race with fear. Jack returned at dusk, bringing renewed hope and a detailed action plan. The fight was just beginning, but this time they would not face the demons of the past that relentlessly pursued them alone. The next few days transformed the ranch into a hub of feverish activity. Sarah Martinez arrived accompanied by a private investigator, Helen Brooks, a former police officer specializing in domestic violence cases. Together, they began to unearth Marcus Dawson's dark secrets. 3 assault cases mysteriously dropped, 2 ex-girlfriends who moved to other states after abusive relationships, and financial records that suggested blackmail and corruption. Emily provided painful details about Marcus's controlling behavior towards her brother Tommy, how he manipulated situations to keep the family under his thumb. The DNA test was scheduled for the next day, and Emily knew the results would definitively prove that Marcus was not the biological father. However, she also knew that men like him don't accept defeat easily. Jack spent the night awake, patrolling the property with his shotgun loaded, determined to protect his new family at any cost. On the morning of the trial, the Laramie courthouse was filled with curious onlookers and local journalists. Marcus Dawson entered the room with his team of expensive lawyers, a confident smile plastered on his tanned face. Tall, well-dressed and articulate, he projected the image of respectability he had built over the years. However, when Sarah Martinez presented the collected evidence, including recorded testimonies from the ex-girlfriends and compromising financial records, the confidence in his eyes began to visibly waver. The DNA test result was categorical. No biological relationship existed between Marcus and the child. Emily testified with a steady voice about the abuses suffered by her family, while Jack remained by her side, offering silent support. Judge Henderson, a veteran of decades in the judicial system, listened carefully to each testimony. When Marcus tried to disqualify the witnesses and question Emily's credibility, his own arrogance turned against him, revealing the violent temper he had tried to hide for so long. The judge's gavel echoed through the silent room as he delivered the final decision. Emily Harper would retain legal custody of the child, and Marcus Dawson would face investigation for document forgery and harassment. Tears of relief streamed down Emily's face as Jack embraced her tightly, the baby laughing happily in his arms as if understanding that he was finally safe. Marcus left the room with his face contorted in anger, but the handcuffs Helen Brooks placed on his wrists made it clear that his days of intimidation had come to an end. Back at the ranch that golden afternoon, Emily and Jack watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange as the child took his first wobbly steps across the yard. The wind carried the scent of fresh hay and the promise of better days. "Thank you for fighting for us," Emily murmured, her hand finding his. Jack smiled, realizing that sometimes happy endings arrive after the most devastating storms, bringing family, love and hope where before there had only been loneliness and silent despair. 6 months after the trial, the Callahan Ranch was thriving as it hadn't in years. The cattle had multiplied, green pastures stretched as far as the eye could see, and the house constantly echoed with the clear laughter of the baby, now almost 2 years old. Emily had become more than a work partner. She had brought new life to every corner of the property. Her skillful hands transformed the abandoned garden into an oasis of vegetables and wildflowers, while her family recipes filled the kitchen with aromas Jack hadn't smelled since childhood. The boy, whom they had decided to name Tommy in honor of Emily's deceased brother, ran through the yard with clumsy steps, chasing chickens and laughing as they scattered. Jack watched these everyday scenes with a warm heart, recognizing that he had found something he thought was lost forever, a true family, built not by blood but by genuine love and the conscious choice to stay united. During a particularly hot July afternoon, while Emily hung clothes on the line, Jack gathered the courage to express feelings that had been silently growing in his heart for months. The words came out hesitantly at first, but gained strength as he spoke about how she had transformed not only the ranch, but his entire outlook on life. "I don't know if it's too soon to say this," he began, removing his hat and running a hand through his graying hair. "But I've fallen in love with you, Emily. With you and with Tommy." She stopped hanging the clothes, her hands trembling slightly as she processed the words she had secretly hoped to hear. The gentle wind rustled the white sheets around them, creating a natural curtain that seemed to isolate them from the rest of the world. "I love you too, Jack," she replied, her voice filled with sincere emotion. "You both saved me when I needed it most." In that moment, they both knew they had found something rare and precious, a mature love built on solid foundations of trust, mutual respect, and shared purpose. The proposal came naturally and spontaneously during a sunset walk through the golden fields. Jack had carried Tommy on his shoulders as they walked the trail leading to the creek, where they used to fish for trout on Sunday afternoons. Emily gathered wildflowers along the way, weaving an improvised crown for the boy, who clapped his hands delighted by the vibrant colors. When they reached the spot where Jack had spread a blanket on the soft grass, he knelt before her, not with an expensive ring, but with a simple gold band that had belonged to his grandmother. "I don't have much to offer besides a simple ranch and a heart that loves you completely," he said, his eyes shining with tears of happiness. "But if you accept, I promise to spend the rest of my life making you and Tommy feel loved and protected." Emily didn't hesitate a second before accepting, knowing she had found not just a husband, but a true, lifelong companion. Tommy, not fully understanding the significance of the moment, applauded cheerfully, as if instinctively celebrating the union of his new family. The wedding was celebrated in the small Methodist church in Pine Ridge, with the presence of neighbors who had become true friends over the months. Sarah Martinez served as maid of honor, while Sheriff Thompson had the honor of walking Emily down the aisle, as she had no family present. Reverend Williams, a gentleman with white hair, conducted the ceremony with simple but profound words about love, commitment, and the beauty of families formed through conscious choice. Emily wore a simple white cotton dress she had sewn herself, and Jack wore his best suit, the same one he had worn at Sarah's funeral years before. But this time, it symbolized a new beginning. Tommy, wearing miniature suspenders and a white shirt, carried the rings on a small cushion, causing loving laughter when he stumbled on the rug. After the ceremony, everyone gathered at the ranch for a simple party, with barbecue, country music, and dancing under the stars. It was the kind of celebration that perfectly reflected the authenticity and simplicity of the life they had chosen together. The following years brought gradual but significant changes for the Callahan family. Tommy grew strong and healthy, developing the same love for rural life that united Jack and Emily. At 4 years old, he was already helping with simple ranch chores, feeding the chickens and accompanying Jack on morning rounds. Emily discovered a natural talent for photography, documenting daily farm life in images that would later become precious memories. Jack gradually expanded the ranch operations, creating a small rural tourism venture that attracted city families looking for authentic country experiences. They built a rustic but comfortable guest house where visitors could experience cowboy life for a few days. The extra income allowed them to pay off all outstanding debts and even invest in improvements to the property. But most importantly was the atmosphere of peace and contentment that permeated each day, built on the genuine love and mutual support that characterized their union. On Sunday afternoons, they would sit on the porch watching Tommy play in the yard, knowing they had created something special and lasting. On a golden autumn afternoon, as the aspen leaves shimmered golden against the crystal-clear blue sky, Emily announced that she was expecting another child. Jack hugged her with infinite tenderness, imagining what it would be like to see Tommy become an older brother. The news brought a different kind of joy than the first time, more mature, serene, built on the certainty that they were prepared to expand their family. Tommy, now 5, was ecstatic at the prospect of having a little brother or sister, to teach everything about horses and chickens. Sitting on the porch that night, watching the stars emerge in the dark Wyoming sky, Emily and Jack reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to that moment. 3 years earlier, she was a desperate fugitive with a baby in her arms, he a lonely widower struggling to keep the ranch running. Fate, or perhaps something greater, had conspired to unite them in a way neither could have imagined. Now, with a new life growing and the family thriving, they knew that sometimes miracles happen silently, one day at a time, building happiness on solid foundations of true love and mutual dedication. The birth of Sophie Callahan on a snowy December morning brought complete happiness to the family. Emily labored for 8 hours, with Jack holding her hand and Tommy asleep in a hospital chair. The girl was born with brown hair like her mother's and expressive blue eyes that seemed to absorb every detail of the world around her. Dr. Patterson, the doctor who had attended the prenatal care, commented he had never seen a baby so alert in the first minutes of life. Jack openly wept as he held his daughter for the first time, remembering how he had dreamed of this moment during years of loneliness. Tommy woke up confused, but his face lit up when he saw his little sister wrapped in the pink blanket. "She's tiny," he whispered, gently touching the baby's tiny hand. Emily smiled through tears of exhaustion and joy, watching the 3 most important men in her life gathered around the hospital bed. The snow continued to fall outside, covering Pine Ridge with a white blanket that symbolized the new chapter beginning for the expanded Callahan family. The first few months with Sophie tested the family's organization, but also revealed the strength of the bonds they had built. Emily found that breastfeeding while managing ranch chores required careful logistics, but Jack took on many of her responsibilities without complaint. Tommy proved to be an exemplary protective brother, always alert to warn when Sophie cried and trying to help with diaper changes with touching seriousness. Nights were often interrupted by the baby's cries, but Jack insisted on taking turns with Emily so she could rest adequately. During night feedings, he would rock Sophie, humming country songs softly, creating a routine that both calmed his daughter and nurtured his own paternal heart. The ranch continued to run perfectly, but now it had a different rhythm dictated by the needs of a small child. Tourists visiting the property were delighted to witness the authenticity of family life, many commenting on the welcoming and genuine atmosphere that permeated every interaction between the Callahan family members. As Sophie completed her first year, her vibrant personality began to emerge impressively. Unlike Tommy, who had always been observant and cautious, she showed insatiable curiosity and courage that sometimes worried her parents. At 10 months old, she was already crawling around the house with surprising speed, investigating every corner and trying to put everything in her mouth. Jack built safety gates at strategic points, but Sophie seemed determined to find creative ways to overcome every obstacle. Tommy took on the role of vigilant guardian, constantly alerting, "Mommy, Sophie's getting into mischief." Emily found that photographing her daughter's everyday moments resulted in comical and adorable images that filled family albums. When Sophie took her first wobbly steps towards Jack's arms, the entire family erupted in applause and tears of joy. It was evident that she would be a force of nature, bringing renewed energy to the ranch that already overflowed with life and love. Afternoons on the porch now included a small child exploring every leaf, stone, and insect with genuine scientific fascination. Sophie's second birthday coincided with an unexpected visit that brought exciting surprises for the entire family. Helen Brooks, the investigator who had helped with the case against Marcus Dawson, showed up at the ranch accompanied by a middle-aged woman named Margaret Harper. With tears in her eyes, Margaret introduced herself as Emily's aunt, her father's older sister who had lost contact with the family after old disagreements. She had hired Helen to locate Emily after discovering through public records about the trial and subsequent marriage. "I spent years looking for you after I learned about Tommy's death," Margaret explained, embracing Emily with genuine emotion. "I want to be a part of these grandchildren's lives I never knew." The family reunion was marked by tears, laughter, and long conversations on the porch, where Margaret shared stories of Emily's father's childhood and showed old photographs that connected the generations. Jack observed Emily's joy at discovering that she was not completely alone in the world, and Tommy was fascinated to meet an aunt who brought presents and stories about family adventures he had never imagined. Margaret decided to take up permanent residence in Pine Ridge, buying a small house in town to be close to her newly discovered family. At 62, retired from a successful nursing career, she brought valuable skills and a willingness to help with the children. Sophie immediately took to her new grandma, who had infinite patience for games and invented stories. Tommy found in her an attentive listener for his observations about ranch life and his elaborate theories on how to train horses. Emily discovered the pleasure of having mature female support, someone with whom she could share maternal worries and receive experienced advice. Jack gained not only a mother-in-law, but a true friend who understood the value of hard work and simple living. Margaret brought old family recipes that had been lost, photographs that filled gaps in the family history, and most importantly, the comforting feeling of generational continuity. The children now had a dedicated grandmother who spoiled them moderately, but also taught important values about responsibility and respect for family. On a golden spring afternoon, as they watched Tommy teach Sophie to feed the chickens under Margaret's watchful supervision, Emily and Jack reflected on the extraordinary journey they had traveled together. 5 years had passed since that cold morning when she knocked on his door carrying a baby and desperate hopes. The ranch now prospered beyond their most ambitious dreams, but the true wealth lay in the family they had built through love, perseverance, and unwavering faith in each other. Tommy, now 7, had become a responsible and caring young man who protected his sister with touching dedication. Sophie, at 2, brought contagious joy to each day with her inexhaustible energy and captivating personality. Margaret completed the family circle, offering wisdom, tradition, and the continuity they had all lost at some point. "Sometimes I think about that day when I arrived here," Emily said, intertwining her fingers with Jack's. I was running from everything, but in reality I was running towards my destiny. Jack kissed her gently, knowing they had created something rare and precious, a true family built on solid foundations of unconditional love.